In the next few weeks, we'll be hearing gospel passages that depict the risen Lord in behaviors that don't sound quite right to us, or at least we don't envision that we would behave the same way if we had been raised from the dead. It seems that we would think that Jesus would go back to his disciples, his homies, and do a blow-by-blow account of what the Passion was all about. Or maybe even have Peter and the boys go through some comeuppance as they are challenged as to why they ran and hid away at Jesus' darkest hour. Or maybe we would like to see Jesus bask in the smothering love of the Marys as they rejoice to have him back. Or maybe we would expect Jesus to do a political and theological analysis of what the resurrection has actually accomplished. Or even just do a show and tell of his body to answer all the questions an inquiring mind would have. Jesus does none of this. Instead, we see Jesus playing hide and seek, if you will, with some of his disciples. We even see the angels acting almost insensitive, asking rather blunt questions of, why are you looking in an empty tomb for someone who has risen? Why are you standing around moping? What's going on here? Don't you believe? I think that this is a brilliant treatment going on here. Brilliant in the sense that God understands our human psychology quite well and recognizes that in this time of mourning, maybe the disciples need a kick in the pants, so to speak, need to be challenged about where their faith is. Because we human beings have a great capacity for wallowing in our fears and our self-pity and our misery. And at the same time, that blinds us to perhaps the direction we need to go, or many of the blessings and advantages that are before us that we are too fearful or afraid to take. So Jesus, I think, is challenging the apostles, like, snap out of it, guys. We got work to do. It is evident that Jesus' resurrected form is more interested in getting the ball rolling, hit the ground running after the resurrection, not necessarily looking to the past. We could probably see examples of that in our own lives. In my hometown, there was a legendary high school coach, and he was legendary because he got to have some very good performances, not only out of the select team of athletes, but even students that didn't think of themselves as athletes. He had the way of letting them know that he believed that they had potential that they themselves didn't see. They would often end up running their hearts out on the track team, not because they were necessarily convinced of their own capacity, but they felt that this coach believed that they could. And maybe this was the first time somebody believed in them when they themselves couldn't believe in themselves. This is where Jesus is at with many of his situations with his disciples. When Peter is in the boat, Peter volunteers to get out of the boat, not because he's convinced of his own ability to walk on the water, but he believes that Jesus believes he can walk on the water. Otherwise, Jesus wouldn't have invited him out on the water. And then even after he starts to sink, when Jesus rebukes him, he's not saying, why did you doubt that you could walk on the water? That'd be foolish to think that he could. But why did you doubt that I wouldn't save you, that I wouldn't protect you as your Lord, the one who loves you? So Jesus was simply calling out the Peter as well as the rest of his disciples for their claims to faith, but not acting in faith. And this is where we're at, where we're dealing with a situation right now where the fever has not yet broken on the pandemic. But we have enough faith in how things work to know that there is going to be light in the end of the tunnel. And for many people, there's going to be much mourning of great loss of life, devastation of various forms in our society, and we can sit and wallow in our misery if we so choose. But instead, we also need to listen to the voices that challenge us to say, we can grow, we can learn, we can expand and evolve from this situation. Not to say that the pain and suffering that people have encountered isn't real or isn't significant, but it shouldn't blind us to moving forward and evolving in a way that God sees possible. So whenever we're in our darkest hour, we need to resurrect our faith and the one who has the capacity of doing the impossible. Jesus doesn't want us to wallow in our suffering, in our pain, in our misery. Instead, he wants to have the conviction that believes that God is doing the impossible and believes that we're going to be participating in that. Maybe that in that way, we too participate in the resurrection, when we truly transcend our human limited condition and we start to see things as God sees them.